Sorry, it's my first time speaking. Right, okay, let's go. We're gonna go on a journey. Good God. We're going to go on a journey. So let's remind ourselves where we started. So back on June the 9th, right? We set our alarms for 1 a.m. Well, I did. I live over in Perth. You set yours probably for what, 3 a.m. And we got out of bed wherever we were. We rubbed our eyes and we turned on our Apple TVs and we got our very first glimpse of Craig Federighi as a Formula One driver. So that was weird. But then we got a lot of what can only be described as glass porn, right? We got lots of glistening, shining, slowly spinning glass things. We got people, presumably Apple employees, fondling glass objects like scientists in a lab. And then eventually we got Alan Dye standing up on our TV screens, and he was saying words like, a new digital metamaterial that dynamically bends and shapes light. He talked about a new level of vitality to every aspect of your experience. He mentioned the natural geometry of our fingers. And of course, most importantly, he talked about deferring to the content underneath. So, what did these words mean? What was he referring to? Well, of course, this was our introduction to this new digital metamaterial called liquid glass. It's called oh, for goodness sake, what's going? Hang on, sorry. Pro tip, if you're going to get an LLM to write your slides, you should probably rehearse. Okay, yeah, I got it now. All right. Sorry. So this was our introduction to a new digital metamaterial called liquid glass. And with it, a whole new design system, a whole new design language for iOS 26 called, well, it's actually, to be pedantic, it's not called liquid glass, right? It's like Frankenstein is not the name of the monster, it's the name of the mad scientist that made the monster. No, I watched all of the relevant sessions, and I can confirm that this new design is called the new design. I should probably use my fancy font. The new design, it's called. And that cursor is killing me. Get out of there. So I feel like I want to get my cards on the table right at the start, and I'm sure many of you want to know, and many of you have asked me this week, do I like it? Do I like the new design? Do I like liquid glass? And the answer to that question is yes. No, I do. I think I like it. But the thing is, this slide has changed, right? I've been thinking about this talk probably since June, really, and for a while this slide was going to say no, because when I first looked at it in the simulator and I installed it on my, random iPad that I hardly ever use, I didn't much like it. I don't know, I found it a bit tacky. But Apple iterated on it over the next few betas, and gradually what I found is that I actually liked it even less. So it was a bit of a conundrum, because I'm going to do this talk at Dev World, and what am I going to talk about? And also because I don't like to see myself as this guy, right? I don't want to be shaking my fist at new things that I don't understand. I see myself as, hip and cool, and, I want to be sort of open to new. I see myself more like this guy. So... So, look, but eventually I sucked it up. I took one for the team. I installed it on my everyday iPhone, and, I lived with it for a little while, and I realized, no, actually, it grew on me. I did like it. So it's a yes from me, but, it's a yes with an asterisk. Or two. There's a number of asterisks. And I'm going to talk to you about three of those asterisks, three areas of concern that I have. Now, I think that you might want to think about. And those three areas are legibility, usability, and brandability. I don't know if that's a word, but I had to follow the rule of threes. And for each of these things, I'm going to give you some things to think about. Now, I've got to say, if you were hoping to get lots of really practical, you've got your pen poised for some really detail, it's not that kind of stuff. It's more sort of philosophical. I want you to think about a few things. In fact, there's actually only one piece of advice for have you, so it'll be easy to remember. So let's start with legibility. And if you had a bet with someone that I was going to mention legibility today, well, congratulations, you won the bet. You've seen this stuff, right? You've either in your own testing, in your own apps maybe, or if not, you've seen it on the internet, right? The truth is, it is exceedingly easy to capture static screenshots of iOS 26 with its pants down. But how bad is this issue? How bad is it going to be in a couple of weeks' time when this thing's go live? Is it going to be a massive disaster? Look, you might think I'm a fool for saying this, and maybe I am. We'll soon find out. I actually don't think it's quite as bad as the internet would have us believe. Look, in the time that I've been using it on my everyday device, I can't really remember a time when I was like, oh my God, I can't possibly read, I can't read it at all. Can I arrange the UI in such a way that, something is exactly under something else so that there's like a line that you can't read? Sure, I can. Maybe, for the purpose of capturing a screenshot and putting on Mastodon, I can do that. But you know what? If I need to read that unread count or that thing, what can I do? I can just scroll it away again, and then I can read it. And I think users are just going to get used to sometimes something is positioned just in such a way that, it's underneath, and they have to scroll it away to see it. It'll become a habit. But I've got to say, that's all very well for me to say as someone who has, pretty good eyes. And I really hope that iOS 26 isn't going to be a big step backwards for those of us who have, other accessibility needs regards our vision. In particular, I hope that a lot more people aren't going to find themselves needing to turn on this setting, reduce transparency. And the reason I say that is because I find it a bit weird in iOS 26. You would think it would just increase the sort of frosting in the bars, but it actually makes them opaque again. And for some reason, sometimes the controls and the title, they go AWOL, and the padding is totally wrong, like the bars aren't padded properly. And I just think that what's going to happen is designers and developers are going to get used to a world where we have these transparent bars with controls just sitting straight on content. And considering the scenario where the bars are opaque again is going to be kind of an afterthought at best. So yeah, I worry a bit about that. So what is my advice to you as a designer, as a developer dealing with legibility in your app? Well, my advice to you is this. You are the boss of your own app. Right? By which, you're the boss of your app's design. Or maybe you're not. Right? Maybe you have a bossy designer or a bossy boss or someone else who is the boss of your app's design. But, maybe you have some influence on that. Maybe just by being the person who's up at 3 a.m. watching the keynote or installing the betas or coming to Dev World and, listening to talks like this. Maybe you can, you can have some influence. So to the extent that you are the boss or have control over the design of your app, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you, you don't have to unquestioningly follow Apple's lead. All right? Let me say that again. You don't have to unquestioningly follow Apple's lead. There was a long time when that was the best thing to do, right? If you just followed exactly what Apple did, you looked at their own apps and you did what they did and you used the system controls, you'd be fine. I think we can all agree at this point that that is not always the case anymore. So, right, Apple has iterated on the transparency of liquid glass throughout the beta cycle. That made it a bit more transparent, a bit less transparent. If you aren't happy with where they land in a couple of weeks' time when it goes live, in the context of your app, then fix it, all right? You are in control of where things scroll under what in your app, and you can change that. And if that's too hard or too much of a change, it's actually relatively easy to put something in between your content layer and the control layer. Some kind of darkening or fading or progressive blur. I think there's an API for that now. It wasn't working, maybe it is now. But something that's going to help. In one of my apps, I have this kind of quite idiosyncratic sort of tab bar style. It's got these kind of weirdly, it's got little thin bits in the icon. It's not your sort of your typical tab bar icons. It's got a custom font. And I just found it was kind of muddy with the heavy content that goes underneath that. So I just put like, so that's it on the left. On the right is what I did. Just like a light gradient behind it, or it's dark in dark mode. And it just helps. It just lifts the content off. So I still get the whole, it's a perfectly normal tab bar. I haven't done anything to customize it. Still get the whole globular thing that it does. But basically what I've done is I've opted everyone into reduced transparency in the context of my app and the way I think reduced transparency should actually work. And it just helps. Legibility we've talked about. Let's talk about usability. Now, there is a talk, a WWDC talk, that had a big influence on me in my journey as a UX designer. It was from 2014, and it was called Designing Intuitive User Interfaces by Mike Stern. Some of you might know Mike, really great guy at Apple. I was in the room for the session. I actually had the fortune to be able to talk to Mike afterwards about some of the stuff he talked about. So this really stuck with me. And I'm going to tell you in a second why I was reminded of it. But Mike, he said, look, an intuitive navigation system in an app does three things. It tells users where they are, it tells them where they can go, and it tells them what they will find when they get there. And to me, this is all about, it's about confidence. It's about instilling confidence in your users using a system. And to me, the huge success of iPhone as the first mass market pocket computer was about some things that Apple did to instill confidence in users using the system, and then when the App Store came along, using third-party software. So one thing, super obvious hardware thing, was this one, right? The home button. Genius, because no matter how messed up any individual app could get, if it froze or stalled or whatever it did, which happened a lot in the start, user could just press that button and they were back in the safe familiarity of their home screen. And then they could open another app and they were fine. This was so different to people's experience with their home and work computers, right? Where they could get lost, some rogue app could just freeze up the whole thing and need to restart. This was such a huge change. So obviously this guy's no longer with us, but several of the things that Apple did as well on the software side to instill that confidence are absolutely still with us. One of them that I think a lot about is this pattern of list and detail. So, iPhone wasn't just the first mass market pocket computer, it was the first mass market portrait computer screen. Really? Right? Before that, every computer screen was landscape, really. And so every application, program, website, they had menu bars along the top, or maybe they had a menu pane on the side, and then the rest would be a content area. You couldn't do that on a portrait screen. So Apple, in all of their apps, just use this pattern of a scrolling list with a really efficient, memory efficient, table view controller. And you pick an item in the list, and detail view navigates onto the stack. And this bar, the navigation bar, that did what Mike Stern talked about. It told the user where they are, and where they can go back to, and what's going to be there when they get there. Now, this control in iOS 26. So what do we see? We see it's transparent now. It's not actually a bar. Okay, I think that's probably all right. The back button doesn't have a title anymore. Okay, so it's no longer telling people where they're going to go back to, but honestly, a lot of designers, myself included, we've been removing the title from that back button for a long time. So yeah, again, probably okay. The bar buttons now, we're encouraged to use icons instead of text. Okay, I hope designers are going to choose good icons, right? But I want to talk about this guy. I'll talk about that one there. So this is a quote from a WWDC session this year. If your bar is feeling too crowded, use it as a cue to remove anything unnecessary. How very dare you, as if I would put something unnecessary in my bar. And move secondary actions into a more menu to keep things clean and accessible. Neat and tidy. And so when I heard the Apple person say this, I was immediately reminded of that session by Mike Stern, because he spent a bit of time talking about hamburger buttons, right? And you know, hamburgers are often not good for us, and they don't get much better when they become meatballs. Mike said, he said, this is his words, hamburger menus are terrible at orienting users because the menu is not visible. Only the button to display the menu is. He showed a picture of junk drawers and talked about that. Now, in fairness to him, he wasn't talking about more buttons as such. He was talking about hamburger menus. So that was that pattern. You kind of saw it a lot back then, where you would have a hamburger button that would, you know, reveal an entire drawer, your entire navigation structure in a drawer instead of a tab bar. You know, more buttons aren't new. We've had them since the very start. But I would argue that many of the things that Mike Stern was warning about in regards to why you shouldn't use that pattern very much apply to, you know, more buttons. You know, you'll hear people say like, oh, okay, maybe back in 2014, people didn't know what this meant, right? They didn't know what that was. So, but now everyone knows that's a menu, so that's fine. That's not the point. The point is that regular people are not as curious as we are, as app developers, as computer touchers. You know, we download an app, we start poking around, we open all the things. Regular users, they don't do that. They are way more conservative. So the reality is, if you have spent time and effort and money building cool functions and features that make your app more compelling to users, and some of those things end up underneath one of these, then there is some proportion of users who will never encounter it. They just won't. And of course, some proportion of them will leave you a dirty review on the App Store and give you a 1-star rating because you didn't have a feature, but it was actually under that thing. And of course, you got to say, like, why is Apple talking about the More button? Why is it sort of promoting the use of the More button? Is it because suddenly it's now a good UX pattern? Well, no, that's not why. It's because iOS 26 kind of necessitates it. Because bar button items are now just so much bigger. They need more padding because of the way they kind of smear around under your finger when you push them, right? So we just have less space, so we've got to do something. So look, it'll be fine. I've used buttons like this. It'll be fine. I just worry that this is going to mean that a lot more stuff is hidden underneath these sorts of menus. And I know from my use of the betas, there are many things in the system apps that used to take 1 tap and now take 2 or even 3. It's not ideal. And so talking about hamburger menus and tab bars, that leads me to the third sort of control, or the third pattern that I think has just been great at instilling confidence in users. And there's this guy, tab bar, and his daddy UI tab bar controller. So I love this control. All right, so I'm going to talk, this next little section of my talk I call an ode to, a love letter to, hopefully not a eulogy to, UI tab bar. So this control, like navigation bar, is just so ubiquitous. It's been with us right from the start of iOS, and it does such a great job of what Mike again talked about, of orienting users to where they are and where they can go to. And I thought to myself, I bet most of my apps have been tab bar apps. I thought it'd be interesting to quantify that. So I went back through my archives and I found 28 apps that I have designed over the years. Mostly built. I think there's a couple in there that I designed for someone else to build, but mostly mine. And of those 28 apps, it turns out that 8 of them didn't use a tab bar because they didn't need to. Right? Not every app needs a tab bar. What is a tab bar? A tab bar, UI tab bar, is a control that displays one or more buttons in a it'd be weird to have one button in a tab bar, right? One or more buttons in a tab bar for selecting between different subtasks, views, or modes in an app. And yeah, it's been with us since iOS 2, which for our purposes is like the start. So yeah, 8 of those apps, they only really had one sort of functional flow. They didn't need a tab bar. 2 more of those apps, they could have had a tab bar. It would have made sense, but I chose not to. Well, actually, one of them, I wanted a tab bar, but there was someone else on the project, and they had very strong opinions, and we had a fist fight, and they won. It was a whole thing. But the other one, it was me. I was being arty. I wanted to make this kind of weird vertically scrolling thing. I'm going to actually show it to you because this was like 2014. So it was like iOS 8, sorry, 2016. Anyway, it was a while back. And Apple released those kind of UI visual effect view things, and I went ham on those things with this app. So here I am making like liquid glass all the way back then, before it was even a thing, complete with all the legibility issues and everything. So that's kind of amusing to reflect on. Anyway, so of those 28 apps, 18 of them used UI tab bar, or to put it differently, 18 out of 20, which, the ones that would have made sense to have a tab bar chose to use it. I have seen this control over the years beat all comers. I have seen so many popular, super highly used apps experiment with other patterns like hamburger menu and eventually come crawling back to UI tab bar. It's just such a good pattern. In fact, I have seen this happen even on entire operating systems. Android, right? Never used to have a concept of a bottom bar. Like the hamburger menu was just absolutely essential part of material design. The first few Android apps I did, it's like, well, I want to be a good platform citizen. And so I had the Android developers I work with do hamburger menu. But eventually I realized, look, okay, it might be the convention over here, but it's a bad convention. It's not good. So I actually had my developers build custom bottom bars that work like tab bar. Now, it's a standard system control in material design, and you don't see this pattern very much anymore. And so here's why I'm talking about tab bar a bit. Over the years, it's looked different. Here it is in sort of iOS 18 currently. You go back a couple of years. Here's some screenshots I took a few years back. I don't actually know the exact years. It kind of is a bit muddy. Here's a screenshot I took all the way back in 2007 on my original iPhone. So tab bar has looked different over the years, but here's the thing, it has behaved pretty much exactly the same. It's always been this, it fills the whole bottom of the screen, it's always on screen unless maybe you temporarily cover it with a modal or something, but it's always there, orienting users. You tap one button, it takes you to a different part of the app. It's really simple and it really works. iOS 26 changes that, right? It is different. It's no longer full width. And now sometimes there's some action button off on the side, typically for search, which it's not. I mean, it kind of is a navigation action, but it's different. And the other thing that's really different is now it collapses, right? It can collapse to a single button, and the icon on that button. It tells you where you are, as opposed to the icon that's normally on a button. Right? Normally it tells you what the button will do or where it will take you. Like if you tap this button, it's not going to take you home because you are home, right? And it just feels like a bit of almost like a contract break with users about how this fundamental control works. And I also think in iOS 26, there's almost like a break of a sort of unwritten contract with designers and developers too, because tab bar has always been extremely easy to customize. Obviously you can provide your own icons, but you can decide how they will be colored. You can provide templatable icons and a tint color and let the system handle styling the selected and deselected states, or you can provide fully rendered icons for both states, so you're fully in control of it. You can decide what kind of bar you want behind it, or even if there's any bar at all. So I have all of these tab bars were all native UI tab bars. I never felt the need to build some kind of custom replacement. But yeah, in my experimentation, I have found that the tab bar in iOS 26 is a lot more resistant to customization. Like it really kind of wants to look as close as possible to this. It kind of doesn't respect color, right? And then that's true of liquid glass, like across the board. Like you feed it a color, but it's doing some fancy stuff. Must drive you mad, Mark, right? Like it's not the color I gave you, and it's not the same as that other place where the same color is. Yeah, I just I wonder if designers are gonna just have difficulty using this control, and I hope more people aren't gonna find the need or the desire to replace it with some other custom thing. So, what is my advice to you with regard to usability in your apps in iOS 26? Well, It turns out I realized I was reaching the limit of my slides in my keynote free tier, so I had to reuse a slide from earlier in my talk. So my advice is, you are the boss of your own app, right? With the same caveats as before. You're the boss of your own app. Just because Apple is encouraging us to lean into this pattern, you don't have to, right? You can find other ways to deal with overcrowding in your toolbars. If you are a tab bar app, well, I mean, your tab bar is going to kind of look like that. That's unavoidable. But some of the other patterns, like the the action button off on the side or the collapsing thing, those are opt-in. And I can tell you that I am not going to be opting into those patterns until I've had a much better chance to see it across a whole range of apps and also to see how users respond to it. Legibility, we've talked about usability. Let's talk a little bit about brandability. And obviously I have touched on it, talking about tab bar, but I think actually more broadly than that across the system, liquid glass is just a lot harder. It's just so loud, right? It's so idiosyncratic. It almost feels like you're competing with it for establishing the character of your app. Here's a case study. This is an app of mine called Spotless. It's like a house cleaning task management app. I built this over a decade ago, and it's gone through some design revisions, but I've always wanted I want it to be really clean and minimal and simple. When I first built this, there was a couple of existing apps that did the same thing, and to my eye, they were a bit ugly, kind of cluttered. And I wanted this to be like the clean, uncluttered app for your clean, uncluttered home, right? That was my unique selling proposition. So when I saw iOS 26, I thought, cool, all right, I can visualize this app in iOS 26. It's a pretty simple app. I can see how this is going to look. First thing I realized I'm going to have to get rid of these big green navigation bars, because iOS 26, it doesn't want to have hard bars, and it doesn't really want us to color the bar. It just kind of doesn't work. So I changed that, and I fixed a few things out, and I ran the app, and it looked like that. And my face looked like that. The thing is, like, this app is very lightly branded, but I just kind of realized, well, the green navigation bar, that did a job. And the job it did was establishing at the top of every screen, this is a green app, right? This sort of minty green color, that is the color of this app. You take that away, and it's just kind of white with a few little green highlights. And I tried, making more of the buttons green, but Apple discourages that. We're not supposed to overuse the prominent colored glass buttons, and also it didn't really help. Now, eventually I solved that. I came up with this idea of putting like a green gradient behind the content on all the screens. So that kind of satisfies my desire to establish the color of the app up front, and also iOS 26's desire to not have hard bars. I'm going to ship this hopefully on day one. I've got a little bit of work to do, kind of, especially tidying up iOS 18. It's kind of broken, but I'm going to ship it. I'm not usually a dark mode person, but I find liquid glass controls kind of look kind of nice in dark mode. But this was easy, right? This is a pretty simple app. A lot of other apps that I've been experimenting with iOS 26, I'm having a lot more trouble. I didn't spend a huge amount of time on this. I did spend some time working on this kind of glassy circular control thing. I've learned a lot about how liquid glass deals with relative size, like the size of the control versus the thing under it. And for a long time, like, the color would fill the whole glass. So anyway, it's a funny material to work with. But I just think a lot of companies, a lot of developers are going to have trouble expressing their design. Put it this way. Right from the very start of iOS up to iOS 6, it was Wild West, right? Apple told us how our app should work. They taught us patterns like list detail, like modality, like tab bars and nav bars and all this stuff, but they never prescribed how our app should look. right? And if we took as our guidance how their apps looked, right, the answer to how should your app look is like, whatever, man. They're all welcome here. You want felt, you want wood grain, you want Corinthian leather, you want to make it look like a tape deck, just go ham. Then iOS 7, of course, suddenly a huge, complete sea change, right? And I feel like Apple just they just realized it was a bit out of control. I think they felt like their platform just needed to grow up and mature. And so, we got iOS 7 and we had to adopt that. Well, we didn't have to. If we wanted to keep our wood and our leather, we could, but we would just look really out of place. To me, this was the high point of opinionatedness in the platform. And every year since then, I think that Apple has just gradually, tastefully moderated the platform to keep it in line with modern sensibilities about things like depth and shadow and color and corner radius, all those things, to the point where right now in iOS 18, I feel like it's a very almost neutral environment for our apps, where we can design our apps within reason, pretty much however we want, and they fit in the system. Until now. And I would argue iOS 26 is nowhere near the kind of massive, complete reset that iOS 7 was. But what it is it's a dramatic return to opinionatedness in the system. And that opinionatedness is just going to be, I think, difficult for us to in some cases exist with our, the character and the style of our apps. So what is my advice to you? I'm sure at this point you know what it's going to be, so come on, humor me. Let's all say it together. You are the boss of your app, all right? You are the boss of your app. So what are you going to do here? You're going to bend liquid glass in ways it really doesn't want to bend to make it look in a particular. You're going to swizzle some private APIs to get it working. Well, you could, but on this occasion we have another tool in our tool chest, and that tool, my friends, is procrastination. Yes. All right. So what does procrastination look like? It looks like this flag here. What is it? UI design requires compatibility. How did they come up with those names? What does that even mean? UI design, so we can turn that on and that buys us time. How much time? 12 months, apparently. And so I got to tell you, I told you I've got one app that I think is going to be ready day one. I showed you a whole bunch of apps I've worked on before. Most of them are defunct or, they're not. But I've probably got 6 or 8 apps that might be updated at some point over the next 12 months. Apart from that one, I'm going to be turning on this flag for all of them. They're all at various kind of stages of brokenness. I'm not going to update them with the new design until I'm really, really confident they're ready. And that is my final and best advice for you. All right? You know your apps best. You know your content best. You know when your app is broken. So please do not ship a broken app. Right? I know the temptation, I felt the temptation, right? You want to be there on day one, you want to hopefully get on Apple's great apps that use the new design list, all right? I get it, but I don't think it's worth the loss of user trust or the bad reviews to ship something that you know is broken. You might have heard podcasters say, if you're not there on day one, you're going to immediately look old and it's, people are going to hate you. Honestly, I don't think that's the case. In fact, I think a lot of big popular apps are not going to adopt this style on day one. You're not going to be alone. And the last thing I'll say is, if you are having trouble getting your head around iOS 26, it could be worse. You could be trying to get your head around Android Material Expressive, because, oh boy, that design language really makes me feel less like that guy and more like that guy. All right, thank you. Actually, wait. Hold up. Some of you probably might be thinking he can't be finished because there hasn't been an anvil yet. There hasn't been a single even anvil animation, so there must be some kind of stinger or post-credit scene. So yeah, there is. So I thought, this talk has been about glass. So what if we did some kind of anvil versus glass sort of competition? So I called up my anvil supplier on the outskirts of Melbourne. Unfortunately, all of his anvils were booked this week. So what am I going to do? So luckily I was able to find a bunch of weird Australian guys, of course they're Australian, who had already done such a thing. So I'm going to play it to you. So this is anvil versus glass. Now you've got to decide which team are you on? Team Anvil or are you on Team Glass? But before you decide, I got to say, this isn't just any glass. This is bulletproof glass, and the anvil in this experiment is going to be dropped from 45 meters. So, right, show of hands. Who is on Team Glass? Who thinks glass beats anvil? Okay. And who thinks anvil beats glass? Who thinks anvil turns glass into liquid glass? All right, we're mostly Team Anvil, of course we are. Right, let's see what happens.
It will be anvil proof. Anvil's not getting through.
Here in! All right, let's do this in 3, 2, 1.
It off. Bulletproof glass, you are amazing. You bounced an anvil.
That was like big impact. Oh. Whoa, 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 whoa. Well, immediate thoughts are gone. That's a hole. I'm not going to touch it. It's lifted the whole thing up.
Yes, Sam, there's a bit to look at there, isn't there?
And it's ended up over there. Lost a couple of chippies. Don't know where they're off to. Oh, here they are. Here's one.
Yeah, right on.
Old Chip and Dale. Remember with the dart and even the bowling ball, we got those sort of nice cracks?
Yeah.
This was just demolition.
This is vomit in art compared to the other one.
So there you have it, conclusive evidence that, in fact, glass beats anvil. I don't know if that means that iOS 26 is going to be like a huge hit or if it's going to break everything, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's it for reals this time.
I think that was a baby anvil. That was undersized and should have been thrown back. It was not the size of the anvil that your anvil supplier normally provides you with. So.
No, that is true. I suspect the result would have been similar. That's conclusive, man.
Okay. We have 0 seconds for a question. Does anybody have a question?
Thanks. Awesome talk. No. Tab bars are awesome. You're right. Min-max for number of items in a tab bar. Minimum and maximum.
3 and 5.
All right, if they can be that short, I'll take one more.
Okay, so hamburger menu, typically navigation. Tab bar, typically navigation. The button in the toolbar with the 3 dots, is that meant for navigation?
Oh, no. I mean, my advice for that button, like I said, I use it sometimes, but you want to put stuff in there that people, either it's like really not important or it's stuff that people will go looking for if they need it. I think about some apps have done well with hamburger menus. So Uber was fine because in Uber, you open the app and it's like, where do you want to go? I want to go to Cremorne, and here comes the car. And at the end, like, how many ratings? You want a tip? You're done. You don't need to go anywhere else. What's in the hamburger menu? Well, it's things like, like you want to change your credit card. You want to make a complaint. You want to sign out. Things Uber really probably doesn't want you to do. So if someone needs to change their credit card, they'll go looking, right? They're not going to go, oh, it's not there. They will eventually tap the hamburger and then they'll see the thing and they'll do it. So I think, you want to put things into your more menu that are things where if people are motivated, they'll go and find it. But you definitely don't want things that are important that you really want everyone to know about because, again, they're not going to find it.
Okay, we're going to have to call it quits there because we have some lightning talks and then parting thoughts to get underway. Thank you, James. One more time.